What's going on? Welcome to the episode. Today we're going to be chatting about menstrual cycle myths because the majority of my clientele over the past 10 plus years has been female, which means I've helped hundreds and hundreds of women lose fat and get healthy at this point. And there are a number of myths or beliefs in regards to the cycle that I've seen so many times that just don't want to go away. So I thought that it would definitely be worth dedicating an episode to. Another reason I'm putting this together is just because it pains me to see women giving up their power to their cycle and believing that many of these symptoms that they experience aren't changeable via lifestyle shifts. Ladies often think that they just have to deal with them for the rest of their lives, and that's just a daunting thought. Also, many young women especially are being put on things like birth control at super young ages to dampen down undesirable symptoms. I'm thinking about skin symptoms specifically here. However, these symptoms can be remedied via lifestyle, and we don't need to put these children essentially on really powerful hormones in their primary developmental years. And so I'm super passionate about this topic for a number of reasons. So I'm going to run through all the myths, explain the whys behind them, and then also share with you exactly how to clear up your cycle-related symptoms that you may be experiencing without the use of hormones or drugs like Advil, ibuprofen, etc. Myth number one is breakouts, okay? Many women believe that their cycle causes their skin to break out. And fortunately, that's not true. You have full control over the appearance of your skin, whether it's that time of the month or not. The reason why women believe this is due to a classic case of causation versus correlation, meaning the amount of treat foods tends to increase before and during a woman's cycle for a number of reasons, which we're going to cover soon. But when the amount of junk food goes up, the skin reacts as a result because the skin is an amazing reflection of what is going on inside the gut, or essentially your digestion. Now, the two most common offenders when it comes to flaring up the skin specifically are dairy and fried foods. Chocolate, in North America at least, happens to be arguably the most common food that's consumed around the cycle. And chocolate has dairy in it, especially milk chocolate. And crushing a bunch of chocolate is just asking for a breakout for a lot of folks due to the fact that the vast majority of people are not lactose tolerant as adults. So as these dietary changes occur around the cycle, women tend to think that it's their cycle that is causing their skin to break out. However, it's actually just the way that their eating habits shift during that time of the month. So it's not causation, it is correlation. But this is really easy to mix up. Now you can think about causation versus correlation like house fires. Every time you see a house fire, you also see firemen. And so someone could say, well, it seems to be that firemen cause house fires. But of course, we know that not to be true. The same case applies here. Your cycle doesn't flare up your skin. It's not the cause of the fire. Your food choices are. And don't just take my word for it. This is so easy to test because all you've got to do is the next time that your cycle comes around, you simply just skip any foods that don't agree with you digestion-wise, and your skin will remain clear. Skip the chocolate, skip the treats, eat solely single ingredient whole foods, and you will see the results for yourself. Myth number two ties in with myth number one, and it is bloating and digestion issues. We've got the exact same causation versus correlation case on our hands here. As food choices get funkier and funkier around the cycle, digestion bloating, and water retention increases, which totally makes sense because it doesn't matter if it's that time of the month or not. If you're eating foods that don't agree with you, they are going to cause bloating and inflammation regardless of whether you have your cycle or not. Men experience this too. But again, don't take my word for it. You can test this. For your next cycle, stick to single ingredient whole foods throughout the whole thing, and you will see your digestion stay right on track. And you'll also see virtually no bloating and stomach distension. I've had so many clients experience literally zero bloating and digestion troubles on cycle, and these same gals had tons of trouble before we started working together. And the only thing that we changed was their diet and lifestyle. And feeling bloated just sucks. So this is amazing news. Myth number 3 is cravings. Oh boy, I said it. Cycle-related cravings are a myth. And before you start cussing me out, this is backed up by research, okay? And it is fascinating. A study specifically looked at chocolate cravings around the cycle in women living in the US. And they found that women born in the US experienced chocolate cravings around their cycle at a far higher rate than foreign-born US women, meaning women that were born abroad and then moved to the US afterwards. And it turns out that the longer a family had been living in the US, the stronger the likelihood of chocolate cravings there were. Meaning, foreign-born women experienced the fewest chocolate cravings, if any at all. First-generation women experienced more chocolate cravings comparatively. Second-generation women experienced chocolate cravings even more frequently, and so on. And they found that even foreign-born women who identified less with their native culture and more with US culture experienced higher rates of chocolate cravings than foreign-born women who identified more with their native culture. Meaning, the more that these women identified with US culture, the more likely that they were to experience chocolate cravings. So interesting, right? Cycle-related cravings are not physiological. They're cultural. And a classic example of this that we're all familiar with is the concept of comfort food. Comfort food varies depending on where you are in the world. Also, comfort food to me is my mom's homemade spaghetti with my aunt's homemade cheesecake for dessert. That is not your idea of comfort food. Your idea of comfort food is whatever you associate with comfort, and it's entirely individual. We've got the same deal here with chocolate cravings around the cycle. They are cultural. They're not biological. Now, there have been people that have tried to connect biological dots, and I always find this funny because I remember specifically someone saying to me that women crave chocolate around their cycle because of the magnesium content in chocolate. And if that were the case, women would crave pumpkin seeds because they are the densest food form of magnesium. They contain 300% more magnesium than chocolate. It's sort of like when folks try to say that red wine is healthy because it contains resveratrol. Alcohol is poison, right? But we love drinking it. And so people do these studies with the intention of cherry picking a single nutrient in something that we just enjoy consuming. And then they try to fit that into some sort of belief or narrative that they just want to believe to be true. Women crave chocolate around the cycle in North America because A, the old folklore is women crave chocolate around their cycle, and B, it's just delicious, and that's why folks want it. The only actual physiological craving that hypothetically makes sense is craving something like red meat around the cycle due to blood loss. Red meat is the most bioavailable form of iron for the human body, and so when women are losing blood, they're losing iron, and so if anyone was going to make an argument for a legit physiological cycle-related craving, it would be that. Also, we all generate routines and association, and we can establish routine very, very quickly. For example, if you go to the airport and you're waiting for your flight and you grab Starbucks and it's delicious and it perks you up, you get that caffeine kick, and now you're even more excited for your trip. The next time you go to the airport, you grab Starbucks again, and the same increased alertness and excitability happens via the caffeine, and all of a sudden, your routine every time you go to the airport is that you grab a Starbucks. Now, it also helps that Starbucks is available in virtually every single airport, right? But this pre-flight Starbucks becomes your travel routine / association, and the same idea is often applied to your cycle. Women develop these routines of, say, curling up on the couch with their favorite bar of chocolate, a warm blanket, a heating pad, and a movie. And this routine becomes just what they do. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily bad. I'm just saying that it has no physiological basis. You aren't controlled by your chocolate cravings around your cycle. You've simply been conditioned to think that it's par for the course, but it's just not. It's a belief, it's culture, it's made up. Now, having said that, if you just like or want to eat chocolate or whatever you happen to want to eat around your cycle, go for it. But just know that these cravings don't have control over you, you choose them. Myth number 4 is back pain. A fair number of women experience back pain around their cycle, and this one is super straightforward. It's simply because of a lack of movement. More time sedentary and on the couch equates to back pain, and this applies to men as well, by the way. And the remedy is so simple. Hit 10,000 steps per day all month long. Done. I'd give the same advice to virtually anyone experiencing back pain. In 99% of the cases, it's the result of lack of movement. Myth number 5 is interrupted sleep. Now, when we look at some of the other myths and the behavior associated with them, like eating more treats, digestion and bloating issues, not moving enough, these are all going to impair your sleep quality. For example, eating more funky foods is going to dysregulate your blood sugar and therefore lead to more frequent nighttime wake-ups. Digestion and bloating issues via treats are going to impair sleep quality as well. Not moving enough means that you likely didn't spend enough time outside getting daylight exposure, and therefore your circadian rhythm gets messed up, as well as the lack of movement, i.e., low energy expenditure leads to restlessness and lower quality sleep. The easiest way to think about this one is how well you sleep after a really, really active day. So let's say that you go for a 4-hour hike one day. You sleep like a baby, right? On the other hand, let's say that you don't see the light of day because you were curled up watching movie after movie. It's often hard to sleep that night, right? So fortunately, it's the habits that are associated with the menstrual cycle versus the menstrual cycle itself that is impairing sleep. Myth number 6 is low energy and moodiness. Now, you're probably putting all of these pieces together at this point and seeing the big picture lifestyle recipe that is behaviors around the cycle that are creating this stuff, okay? So more treat foods leads to bloating and digestion issues, which leads to less movement, and less movement leads to poor sleep, and poor sleep equates to a higher likelihood of low energy and moodiness, and low energy leads to more funky food decisions, and the cycle goes on and on and on. All of these things are essentially lending themselves to one another. And so that's why we see these clusters of PMS symptoms and believe that it's the cycle itself because it's become so common. It's not normal, but common. And it makes perfect sense, right? Because if you just take out the menstrual cycle itself, you're still going to experience all of these symptoms no matter what time of the month it is, if you engage in these behaviors. Even if you're a man, it's not even a female thing, it's a human thing. Myth number 7 is sort of a myth and sort of not, and it is cramps. Okay, menstrual cramps are real. Women aren't making them up. However, what I see in my female clients is that the healthier and healthier that they get, the fewer and fewer cramps show up cycle after cycle. Meaning, the better and better your lifestyle choices become, the fewer and fewer cramps you will experience. For example, when a woman starts working with me, her first cycle is far better on the symptom front than usual. Her second cycle is even better yet, and so on. These symptoms just continue to improve month after month and ultimately often disappear. Now, I've seen some stuff associated between consuming a lot of seed oils and PMS cramps specifically, and a lot of folks are pointing the finger at seed oils for causing just about every single health issue on the planet right now, and I see where they're coming from. However, they're so hyper-focused on seed oils themselves that they're missing the forest for the trees. Seed oils are things like soybean oil, cottonseed oil, rapeseed oil, etc. And the vast majority of seed oils that folks consume are in heavily processed foods. And the reason they're in so many heavily processed foods is because they're cheap and they're shelf stable, aka they're profitable. So it's not so much the seed oils in and of themselves that are inflammatory and causing all sorts of health issues. It's the package that they're coming in, which are heavily processed, hyper-palatable foods that are very easy to overeat and often contain things that irritate digestion and the immune system. The less heavily processed foods that you eat, the healthier you are going to get, and the healthier that you get, the fewer and fewer cramps you are going to experience. So the underlying message of this episode is keep your healthy habits on track throughout your cycle. So for the entire month, and you are going to be blown away by how much better you feel. And the healthier and healthier that you get, the less and less you're going to even notice your cycle at all. I have women that have had the smoothest months of their lives after we dial in their nutrition, movement, and sleep habits, and they feel so liberated because they thought that they were going to have to deal with these symptoms for the rest of their lives. And they don't. You don't. You can take your power back and feel great all month long. Now, a tricky little psychological factor at play that I absolutely think is worth mentioning. Some people on some level actually like their PMS symptoms. And I know that that sounds strange. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that Becky is a real hard-charging lawyer that has a tough time winding down and giving herself the rest that she needs. And the only time that she gives herself permission to have that break is during her cycle. And so I come along and say, you don't have to feel low energy, crampy, etc., etc. And Becky might actually feel threatened by that because if she were to take the rest that she needs when she was feeling great, she'd feel guilty, she'd feel lazy, she'd feel unproductive, and the list goes on. But her cycle symptoms let her off the hook. Now, this is just one example, but it's actually an example that I've shared with you guys about myself personally in regards to alcohol. I haven't had a drink in 9 months, and I found that the only time where I really gave myself permission in the past to have a lazy day was one where I was hungover. And so when I eliminated alcohol from my life, I found myself working every single day straight through the weekend because I felt great and I didn't give myself permission to take a break. So this is actually something that I've had to be really aware of since becoming sober. And I have to go out of my way to say, hey, Marcus, take a breather, dude. You're not working this afternoon. There are all sorts of sneaky payoffs in life. I had a client a while back that had MS, which is multiple sclerosis. And MS is an autoimmune condition where the immune system attacks the nerves, essentially. And we figured out that she was completely gluten intolerant. And so whenever she had gluten, she would get exhausted and it felt like the blood was boiling in her legs and feet. Her words, not mine. Now, the most interesting thing about this client of mine was that if she skipped gluten, she felt amazing and life was dandy. However, she still ate gluten on a regular basis. And you might be wondering, why? As our work progressed together, she finally acknowledged that when she had an autoimmune flare-up, that was the only time that her family noticed and acknowledged all of her contributions around the home. The cooking wasn't done. The cleaning wasn't done. The house was a mess. And so her family would be like, oh shit, mom's on the couch and now I've got to do all of this stuff on my own. They didn't realize just how much she contributed. She wanted that acknowledgement from her family so much that she was willing to make herself sick to get it because she knew what she could and couldn't eat in regards to staying healthy and thriving. But that need for recognition was just too powerful to pass up, and she didn't know how to get it any other way. So if you're wondering why you're engaging in behaviors that just don't seem to make any sense to you, there are payoffs at play that you're unaware of. Another quick example, my grandma was sick for about 35 or 40 years with too many autoimmune conditions to count. She's passed now, but when someone is sick for that long, yet doesn't pass away, you've got to wonder, why? Because that's a lot of suffering, right? My grandma was lonely and she didn't have a whole lot of human interaction on a day-to-day basis other than with her husband, my grandpa. And whenever a certain health issue popped up for my grandma, she would get a lot more family visits from her kids, her grandchildren, as well as her friends. And so associations begin to build, right? I'm lonely, and when I'm extra sick, I don't feel as lonely because the people that I love come to see me. And so I believe she essentially started to make herself sick on a certain conscious or subconscious level because she didn't know how to get the love that she knew that she needed in any other way. Now, I know that I've strayed a little bit from the menstrual cycle topic, but I think that stories like this are really powerful because hidden payoffs can actually run our lives when we're not truly aware of what's going on just slightly under the surface. We have the power to create our lives, and ideally, we find more constructive ways to give ourselves what we need instead of having to resort to suffering or making ourselves ill in order to get them. When you change your lifestyle for the better, your PMS symptoms will reflect that perfectly. Eat single ingredient whole foods that you digest really well, hit your 10K steps per day, and sleep 7 to 9 hours per night all month long, and your quality of life is going to skyrocket. If you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the description below or head on over to n1fitness.com/coaching. On Instagram, I'm at N1Fitness. On TikTok, I'm at the N1Fitness. And on YouTube, I'm at Marcus Sadu. Please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that you found this episode useful, and I will catch you on the next one. See ya.